So today I would like to share with you my workflow for recording and performing the music I create with Bitwig and how I approached things in the last year or so. I have here an example of a track I recorded, and I want to start with how I record everything. So I like working in the clip launcher. I don't really use the arrangement view. I'm not arranging things really. I prefer to perform everything live and record it live. I will show you also the performance aspect later on. But for the recording, after experimenting a bit, I realized that for me it's much more fun to commit to the sounds and record only the audio. I don't really like working with MIDI. So I'm on Windows and I'm using Reaper for recording everything. As you can see here, it's already recording because I'm recording the microphone as well. Right, but you can see that I have the different tracks. Right, the kick, the bass, the hats, noise, all sorts of the different tracks that I have in the track itself in Bitwig. And again, I'm on Windows, and Reaper on Windows has a plugin called Reroute that allows me to route audio back and forth between software. So again, in Bitwig, I have the audio here set to reroute, as you can see here. Right, and I have each track with its own channels, right? So I have the kick going to its own channel, the bass, the heads. You can see this here, right? I have 9 and 10 for the heads, the noise sequence 15, 16, and so on and so forth. So again, in Reaper, I have a track for each of the channels, so I can multi-track record everything directly to audio. So again, in Bitwig, if I play, for example, scene 3 here, right, and we have a look at Reaper, you can see that now it's recording these tracks, this audio that is going on. Right, and again, I don't have to deal with MIDI or anything. What I record stays like this, and I commit to the sounds. Right, I don't go back and forth and change anything or something after the recording. It's like really working with hardware. You cannot really go back and change things. I really like this workflow. I find it very inspiring, and I don't find myself going back and tweaking things endlessly until I don't want to work on the track anymore. So again, I build the voices in Bitwig, and then I record them live into Reaper as audio. But there is one thing that I like doing that gives me a bit more freedom when I'm mixing things. So for example, if I look here at the bass delay track, right, let me play this again, maybe the scene 4 with a bit more voices here. Right, so I have here the bass delay track, and you can see if I bring this in for a second, right, we have delay and reverb, and in this case it's on the track itself, right? I have here the delay and the reverb, and it's going to the tool device for side chaining with the kick drum, so it's side chained with the kick. I have the effects baked into the sound. But for example, if we look at the random notes track that I have here, right, let me bring this in. Right, I have delay and reverb on the sound, but it's not in Bitwig. Right here I have no delay or reverb, but there is still delay and reverb on the sound itself. Right, and this is something I do a lot. So if the delay and reverb are not a part of the chain, so they are not a part of the sound itself, like with the bass we saw before, that the delay and reverb are side chained to the kick. In this case, with the random notes, the delay and reverb are sort of an end of chain effects. So in this case, I'm not recording them. Right, if we look again in Reaper and I will look at the random notes track, you can see I have all of the effects here, the delay and the reverb and anything else that I wanted to add. So this is not baked into the sound, this is not recorded, right? It makes mixing later on much easier. If I want to adjust the frequencies with an EQ, if I want to compress things, or even just adjust the levels, I can do this before the effects. I have access to the sound before it goes to the delay or reverb. And again, it makes things easier when mixing everything. I will show you later on also how I mix. But again, I tried a couple of times to record everything in Bitwig, but I prefer to use Bitwig similarly as I use my hardware. I use it as an instrument by itself, creating the sounds, creating the sequences, and then recording everything live into Reaper as audio. Now for performing the track, I'm using here the APC Mini. There's a script for it driven by Moss for Bitwig. So I can use the clip launcher, I can launch clips, we will see everything in a second. I can launch clips, I can stop them. And I also have here sliders that I can use to control various parameters. You can see here I have also the same example in Bitwig. And you can see here I have macro controls set. I don't really like using the remote controls because they can control just one parameter and there's a limited number that you can use. But in this case, I'm using macro controls to control different aspects that I thought while building the track, I thought can be interesting for the performance. Right, so them I can control with the different sliders, and you can see I'm using here just a tape. This is a painter's tape, I guess. So it will not leave also marks on the table, and you can see I just have it here taped, and I have it divided with names or with tags or whatever that helps me to remember exactly what is what. And if I need more sliders or more controls, sometimes I will also use this Korg Nano Control 2, right? It has sliders and knobs and buttons. So sometimes I will use this as well, but mostly I use the APC Mini. It's very affordable and it's quite helpful for the clip launcher. So let's really see how this is working, right? I have here, if we look here in Bitwig, right, I have the same example, kick, bass, and you see I have everything organized. As I mentioned before, sometimes I will have everything organized like this. Sometimes it will be just one clip and I will bring things in and out as I see fit for the track. Right, so for example, now I can start things. Right now we have just kick and hats. I have here the slider to control the chords that will come. Right, another slider to control the hi-hat. Right, and then I can bring in the next row. Control the bass. Right, and like this I can perform the track and go and move between rows here, between sorts of arrangement, if you will, but again, it's all performed live and recorded live. Right, now another aspect that I have here, for example, if I stop now just the kick, you can hear I still have the side chaining going. Right, so we still get the movement from the side chaining, and this is something that I do a lot. Maybe there's an easier way of doing this. But now you see this here on the left, this track here, this is the kick and it's not playing, but still there is side chaining. I'm using the sidechain device or the ducking device here to sidechain things. So I have here a dummy track, this gray track here. I hope you can see everything. And this is basically exactly a duplicate of the kick track. And this is always playing and I'm taking the side chaining from it. It's not going to the output, to the master output. But the audio for the side chaining always comes from it. So the side chaining is always on, even when the kick is not playing, right? So there is always this movement, right, with the ducking. Right, and like this I can perform the track. Right, I can control everything, bring voices in and out, the kick, right, and everything is quantized because it's with the clip launcher. Right, and like this, everything is playing, and I can launch clips and control things with the macro controls. And again, I have the dummy kick track, so everything is always sidechained. Right now, sometimes, let me stop this for a second. Now, sometimes I will also use my modular. I have the ES9 from Expert Sleeper, so I can send signals back and forth. Sometimes I will add also voices from the modular. In this case, with this track, I'm not doing it. But you can see in the different tracks that I'm using also all sorts of textures or looping or granular or sampling or stuff like this that I do with the modular. Sometimes I will have it synced with the clock from the ES9 from Bitwig. Sometimes it will be unsynced. And this is how it looks like after the recording. You can see it was all recorded as audio one shot. Something I do before I start mixing is removing the silent parts, so it's visually easier for me to see what's going on, where each track or where each sound starts and ends, right? So you can see I remove the beginnings in the beginnings and the ends. Right, again, just so it's visually easier for me to see what's going on, where each voice starts and ends, but there is no arranging really. I'm not using any automation. Again, everything was recorded live, so if I play this, for example, right, this is the performance, this is how I performed it. Right, so this is basically the track. Right now, the mixing process for me starts already when I'm building the track and while I'm performing it. So for example, the notes that I choose for the different voices to play will have a great effect on the frequency spectrum. Also using filters to bring voices in and out has a great effect on the result. So the choices I make while I build the track are already a part of the mixing process. So when it comes to mixing, there is not a lot that I'm doing actually. Mostly, and actually this is my biggest challenge, something I definitely have to work on and get better at, is having balanced levels. Because when I perform or record a track, I don't really pay attention to the level so much. So I always have to go back and make changes. For example, you can see the kick I had to take down, the bass delay here, the open hat, right, was way too loud while I recorded it. So I always have to go back and make changes. I also don't really use so many plugins. A few years ago, I got the Isotope bundle and I use some of their plugins. So for example, I will use the Imager just to make sure things are working in the stereo field. I'm using the Vintage Tape a lot. It can add a nice crunch to everything. And also the Sculpture, which will also add the crispiness to the sound. Again, I got this a few years ago, and I just keep using them because I have it. Sometimes I will also use their EQ. There is this nice dynamic side chaining, right? So I can side chain just certain bands. Again, it's not for composing so much. This stuff I can do in Bitwig, but just if I hear that things are interrupting one another, I can remove frequencies dynamically and make space for other voices. Another plugin that I use a lot is the Total Balance Control. This shows me more or less the balance. So if I play the track, right, I can see the lows, I can solo things and hear what's going on in the different bands. You can see it's definitely, my mix is definitely not optimal, but I try my best. Right, and this is just a tool to help me visualize things, visualize the levels. So I do this a lot. Other plugins that I will use that are not from Isotope, I use Supercharger, which is a compressor from Native Instruments. It has this punch. I'm sorry it's so small, but I cannot find a way to make it larger. It has this punch and dirt modes that again will add some crunchiness to the sound, and it's a nice EQ with just one knob, so it's very easy to use. And I will also use sometimes the cassette module. In this case, it's off, so I didn't use it, but sometimes I will use it. Let me show you what it can do. I have a preset that I saved. It's called Master, of course. Right, so again, now it's off. Now it's on. It adds a lot of bass. but it will also tame the highs a bit, and it will add again a bit more crunch to the sound. So sometimes I will use it, sometimes not. In this case, I didn't use it. And another plugin that I use all the time is the Loud Max, just to make sure things are loud at the end, right? This is my so-called mastering process, just to make things louder. It's a limiter. It has this nice link mode, so you can listen exactly to what it's doing if it's processing the sound too much. Later on, I will show you also other plugins that I use, but this is basically it when it comes to mixing and so-called mastering. I really don't do so much. As I mentioned before, I believe that mixing starts already while building the track, so I try my best to make the right choices. Here's another example of a different track. You can see also here I removed the beginnings, the beginnings and the ends, and I use more or less the same plugins, right? I have here again the imager, supercharger, the vintage tape. Right, in this case, I did use cassette, right? So it was on. Let me play this a bit. Right, and again, if I take it off, I'll bring it in. Again, just adds a bit more crunch. Also here, I use the total balance control. Right, also you see the bass is way too high in this case. I'm trying my best. Loud Max, again, so the same plugins. But again, there is not a lot going on. So the most plugins I use are actually native Bitwig devices. Here I have a different track. In this case, I had only one clip for the different voices. And you can see that most of the sounds are coming from Bitwig devices. Let me play this. Right, so I have the kick is the E-kick. The bass is a combination of polysynth, FM4 and polysynth. Right, the hats are the E-hats. The ARP is the polysynth. I have also the different effects, the pitch shifter, for example, E-snare with the note repeats. The clap is just the clap with a few effects here, right? I'm using the delay, filter plus, right? So most of the devices I use, most of the plugins are basically Bitwig native devices, but there are a few additional plugins I really like. Let me solo the ARP here for a second. Right, and here, for example, the first plugin that I use a lot, and you see me using this also on the videos, is the Valhalla Supermassive. This is a free plugin, it's a reverb with all sorts of different modes, and it sounds amazing. It's basically the only reverb I use for a long time now. Another plugin I really like is the Valhalla Delay, also from Valhalla, of course. This is not a free plugin, but still it's very affordable. And it's very, very good. I like using the tape mode. Right, it has wow and flutter. I love playing with the feedback. Right, it has also ping pong mode. It has all sorts of different delay types. The BBD, the Bucket Brigade, is also one I use a lot. The analog one is quite fun. There's lo-fi, there is a phaser even. Right, so there are all sorts of different delays here. It's a really great plugin. Sometimes instead of the Valhalla delay, I will use the other desert cities that I got also not a long time ago, I guess, from Audio Damage. This is also a delay. In this case, with this delay, what I like is that the feedback or the regeneration is really high. So I can really loop things and create all sorts of different effects with the feedback. And it has also this Sky Valley granular mode that can pitch shift things by octaves. Right, and it's a granular delay that I also like to use sometimes. Right, it has also randomness. Right, so it can also be quite a fun delay that I use. And another another plugin that I use a lot is Unfiltered Audio Silo, which is a granular plugin. If I take the mix all the way up, right, it's granular. In this case, I have it also transposing the sound by octaves. Right, but it will make the sound a bit more complex, and I add it just as another layer. Right, it has also a built-in panning, also a built-in reverb that I don't use so much. I should start experimenting with it a bit. It has also different rhythms. Right, so you can experiment with. This is also a very, very good plugin. But again, that's it, more or less. You know what? Let me play the whole track. Such a nice track, I think, in my opinion. Right, but again, that's it. I don't have too many plugins. Of course, that I will in the future experiment with other plugins, but this is for now what I used in the last year or so. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm sure I forgot to mention a few things, but that was it for today. Thanks again for watching. Cheers.